Hi, this is Tamara Mills with the late great USA Coming War with Iran, Part 3. The Part 3 that I had recorded before was corrupted, so we are having to do this one more time, and my thing keeps freezing. I don't know why. Anyway, the reason I'm looking loverly is because I just got out of choir practice. Well, not practice, we had a performance. And so they had us looking especially nice, as it were. I'm trying to figure out a way to get this a little bit closer and yet still the same height. I guess I should have figured this out before, huh? Well, we're going to try and pick this up one more time. God's will prevail, Satan's will not. Daniel 8:6. And he came to the ram that had the two horns, which I saw standing before the river, and rushed upon him in the fury of his power. This is plainly the description of a frontal attack. The goat will use the fury of its power in attacking Iran. The characterization of the goat as in a fury probably indicates that the attack on Iran will be in response to some terrorist attack on the U.S. and other Western nations, which infuriates Americans in the West generally. While the present environment of general antipathy toward the U.S. because of its imperial handling of Iraq would make an attack on Iran seem improbable, it's easier to see the building of a consensus of allies to attack Iran if that nation can be plainly linked to the planning or carrying out of terrorism on the West, and pretty much when aren't they? Thus, goat and horn, that is, the West and the U.S., will have reason to be very angry at Iran if some triggering event occurs. In the eyes of many State Department officials, good reasons already exist to think soberly about a preemptive strike against Iran. Verse 7 says, And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with anger against him, and smote the ram, and broke his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, and he cast him to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Now, verse 7 of Daniel 8, let me move that a little bit, depicts an obliteration of these Islamic forces. The two horns are utterly broken with no one to help. With the demise of the Soviet Union, it would seem that there would be little danger to the West of retaliation from Russia if Iran is bombed. Apparently, the Islamic ties of Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern nations will not keep them from stopping the horn breaking by the West. It could be that what Iran does to invoke the fury of the West is so despicable that even Islamic partners cannot condone it, or it could be something relating to Iran's Shiite leanings. In any case, the words of the prophecy are sure. There was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. The West will obliterate Iran. The war drums are already being beaten in some of the secret power chambers of Washington. Iran is coming between the crosshairs of American might. The scripture says that the goat power is moved with anger. Now, isn't that a fair description of the U.S. attitudes after the destruction of the World Trade Centers on September 11th, 2001? Another atrocity would obviously generate similar anger. One way or another, the prophecy indicates that there will be a U.S. strike on the second Middle Eastern country, probably Iran, and while the popular press, until relatively recently cared little about the terrorist threat posed by Iran, there is an abundance of military intelligence that has been gathered by the U.S. about the danger posed by Iran. Iran has been one of the main causes of the insurrections in Iraq after the American takeover. Iranian cleric Qadem al-Husseini al-Harri issued a religious edict called a fatwa telling Iraqis not to collapse morally before the means used by the great Satan, the U.S. I did warn you all about my pronunciation of Middle Eastern words, right? It kind of lacks. Iraqi cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, can I buy a vowel? Who was leading many pockets of armed resistance against the U.S., is an Iranian agent. Iran armed and trained some 40,000 Shiite Iraqi fighters for war and sent them to Iraq to foment an Islamic revolution. The Israeli Prime Minister at the time, Ariel Sharon, called for an invasion of Iran the day after Iraq was crushed. Now, Iran is much larger than Iraq, about 50 million versus Iraq's 18 million, and was clearly developing nuclear technology in previous years, even if it has temporarily suspended this technology, which it hasn't any longer. Doesn't that make you feel all kinds of safe? If you don't mind my saying, it reminds me of a song by Tom Lehrer, Who's Next? And he's talking about America's got the bomb, but that's okay. Let's see. Russia and America's got the bomb, but that's okay. The balance of power is kept that way. And hear that so-and-so is coming up with a bomb any day. Who's next? The U.S. House of Representatives authorized preemptive military strikes against Iran in a 376-3 vote in May of 2004. Congressman Dan Burton of Indiana said of the vote, Iran has engaged in a systematic campaign of deception and manipulation to hide its true intentions and keep its large-scale nuclear efforts a secret. A U.S. military action plan for... Oh, let me try that again because I'm having troubles today. A U.S. plan for military action against Iran has been complete since May of 2003, according to the Sydney Morning Herald. Now, under the plan, the U.S. would strike the Iraq Natanz, Isfahan, and the Behr installations with precision missiles launched from Iraq, as well as Iran's northern neighbors, Georgia and Azerbaijan. If you ask, I can type these words out for you and you can look it up. British and American intelligence and special forces units have been put on alert for the possibility of an Iranian conflict, according to British news sources. Also, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz recently revealed that a special Mossad unit has been activated to draw up Osirik II, a reference to the 81 Israeli bombing raids that destroyed the Osirak nuclear complex near Baghdad. Mossad chief Mir Dagan declared Iranian nuclear capacity to be the greatest threat ever faced by Israel. In December of 2003, he informed the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee that an operation to annihilate Iran's facility has been finalized. Israeli Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz also announced that under no circumstances would Israel tolerate nuclear weapons in Iranian possession. Congressional investigators report that Beijing is sending nuclear technology to Iran in exchange for oil. Iranian Foreign Minister Kamal Karazi rejected further outside influence on Tehran's nuclear ambitions 2 days before the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors met to discuss Iran's highly controversial program. We won't accept any new obligations, Karazi said. Iran has a high technical capacity and has to be recognized by the international community as a member of the nuclear club. This is an irreversible path. Don't they just sound like kids on a playground? Well, now we have one too, so you got to let us play. Really? Sorry, but that's how it sounds to me. The Special U.S. Commission report on September 11th terrorist attack on the World Trade Centers reported that Iran may have facilitated the 2001 attacks on the United States by providing 8 to 10 al-Qaeda hijackers with passage to and from training camps in Afghanistan. Time and Newsweek and similar reports quoting Congressional Commission and governmental sources said Iran relaxed border controls and provided clean passports for the hijackers to transit Iran to and from Osama bin Laden's camps between October of 2000 and February 2001. The Commission's report says Iran at one point proposed collaborating with al-Qaeda on the attacks against America, but bin Laden declined. A senior Iranian military official claims that Israel and the United States would not dare attack Iran since it would strike back anywhere, or could strike back anywhere, in Israel and against U.S. military installations in the Middle East with its latest missiles. The entire Zionist territory, including its nuclear facilities and atomic arsenal, are currently within range of Iran's advanced missiles, said Yadollah Javani, head of the Revolutionary Guard's political bureau. Therefore, neither the Zionist regime nor America will carry out its threats against Iran. He continued by saying that an attack on Iran could only be carried out by angry or stupid people. What does he think that the rest of the world is? Obviously, he thinks they've fallen to the frightened category, but I think those that would attack Iran would fall into the category of the angry. And after all the crappy things that Iran has been doing to the world and everything else, it's completely reasonable that they'd be angry. Call me silly. Pulitzer Prize winning author Charles Krauthammer asks, did we invade the wrong country? One of the lessons now being drawn from the 9/11 report is that Iran was the real threat. It had links to al-Qaeda, allowed some of the 9/11 hijackers to transit through, and is today harboring al-Qaeda leaders. The Iraq war critics have a new line of attack. We should have done Iran instead of Iraq. Well, of course Iran is a threat and a danger, but how exactly would the critics have done Iran? Iran is a serious country with a serious army. Compared to Iraq, an invasion of Iran would have been infinitely more costly. The fact is that the war critics have nothing to offer on the single most urgent issue of our time: rogue states in pursuit of weapons of mass destruction. Iran instead of Iraq? The Iraq critics would have done nothing about either country. There would today be two major Islamic countries sitting on an ocean of oil supporting terrorism and seeking weapons of mass destruction instead of one. Okay, I am going to stop right here and see if we can get this recorded, done a little more properly, done with Windows Movie Maker, and wish me luck.